He found me shattered, called me his, promised to heal every broken piece. But just when I started to feel whole again, he used my scars to destroy me. But then, I made sure he'd never be whole again either. I wasn't a person when he found me. I was a collection of broken pieces held together by exhaustion, grief, and silent screams that no one ever heard. Grief doesn't come in waves. It floods. It crushes. It seeps into your skin until even your bones ache. I used to be someone once, a daughter, a friend, an artist, a dreamer. But when my father died, all those identities collapsed like a house of cards. He was everything to me. My compass. My safety net. My biggest cheerleader. Watching cancer devour him piece by piece was like being tied to the tracks, forced to smile while the train barreled toward me. When he took his last breath, it felt like my own lungs forgot how to function. People say time heals. They lie. Time doesn't heal. It numbs. It distracts. But healing? That takes something else. Something, or someone, who sees through the mask. And that's when Adrian stepped into my life. It was raining the first time we spoke. Not the romantic kind of rain they write about in poetry, but a cold, slashing kind that felt like the sky itself was in mourning. I was sitting behind the university library, soaked to the skin, my sketchbook destroyed by the storm, sobbing quietly because my heart couldn't hold it in anymore. I didn't even hear him approach. But suddenly, a warm voice broke through the storm. "Do you want some coffee?" I looked up, dazed, mascara streaked down my face, hair clinging to my skin, and there he was, tall, striking, like someone stepped out of a dream, holding a steaming paper cup toward me like it was a lifeline. I blinked at him. Didn't speak. Couldn't speak. He didn't push. Just sat beside me, sipped his own drink, and stared at the gray sky like it had something profound to say. And after a few minutes of silence, he said something I'll never forget. "You don't have to talk. I just didn't want you to feel invisible." In that moment, something cracked inside me. Not the same crack that comes from breaking, but the kind that lets a bit of light in. Over the next few days, he found me again. And again. Sometimes it was accidental, bumping into me at the art studio. Other times, it was deliberate, waiting outside my class with that same calm smile and 2 cups of coffee. Adrian wasn't loud or flashy. He was quiet, attentive. When I spoke, he listened. Not the way people pretend to listen, checking their phones or nodding on autopilot, but with full focus, like my words were valuable. Like I was. He asked questions no one else did. "What do your sketches mean to you? What was your dad like when you were little? What do you miss most about who you were before the loss?" And with each answer I gave, he gently wove himself into the spaces I thought would stay empty forever. One day, I told him, "Sometimes I feel like I'm just fragments. I don't even know who I am anymore." He didn't flinch. He took my hand in his and said, "Then let me help you pick up the pieces." No one had ever said something so kind to me. So devastatingly sincere. It became our thing, this idea of rebuilding. He'd leave sticky notes in my locker with messages like Peace #12. "You smiled today. That's progress." Or Peace #38. "You didn't cancel lunch. You're stronger than you think." He made me believe I was healing. I started going back to my art classes. I sketched again, tentatively at first, then with a hunger I hadn't felt in months. The darkness in my drawings slowly began to shift. No more shattered mirrors or bleeding hearts. I started sketching butterflies, light filtering through trees, hands reaching toward the sun. Adrian noticed everything. He'd frame my drawings and hang them in his room. He'd text me poems late at night, the kind that made your chest ache in a good way. And when I'd wake from a nightmare, shaking and breathless, he'd whisper, "I've got you. You're not alone." In a world that had forgotten me, Adrian made me feel seen. He made me feel safe. And slowly, dangerously, I let my guard down. One night, we were lying on his rooftop, watching stars blink through the city haze. I remember turning to him and whispering, I think I'm starting to feel okay. Not perfect, but okay. He smiled and pulled me into his chest, kissed the top of my head, and whispered, That's all I ever wanted, for you to feel whole again. And I believed him. God, I believed him. I didn't know then that he wasn't stitching me together out of love. He was rebuilding me just so he could tear me down better this time. He wasn't healing me. He was studying me. Every wound I showed him. Every fear I confessed. Every scar I uncovered. He wasn't holding them gently. He was memorizing the pressure points. And I was too blinded by hope to see it. Looking back now, the signs were all there. But love, especially the kind you find when you're drowning, makes you ignore the current pulling you under. I didn't know how to tell the difference between someone holding me and someone gripping tightly enough to crush me. Not until it was too late. Adrian started small. At first, it was just little things. Things you could almost excuse if you weren't paying attention. If I wore a dress he didn't like, he'd smile and say, You look nice. But the blue one brings out your eyes more. If I mentioned seeing a friend he hadn't met, he'd casually ask, Do you even like being around her? I always thought she seemed jealous of you. I didn't see it for what it was. I thought he was just caring, protective, attentive. But soon, caring turned into control. Suggestions turned into rules. And protection turned into isolation. One day, I got a call from a childhood friend, Aisha. We hadn't spoken much since Dad passed, but she'd heard about everything and wanted to reconnect. She invited me to an art show downtown, said it'd be healing. I told Adrian that night, expecting him to smile and say, You should go, it'll be good for you. Instead, his whole mood changed. He didn't yell. Adrian never yelled. His weapons were far more elegant. Subtle. He just went quiet. Cold. When I asked what was wrong, he shrugged and said, Nothing. Just, funny how the second you start getting better, you suddenly don't need me anymore. That guilt sliced deeper than any blade. I canceled the plan. Told Aisha I wasn't ready. Adrian smiled the next day and kissed my forehead. Thanks, baby. I just need to know I still matter to you. I convinced myself that was love. But love doesn't feel like walking on glass barefoot. Love doesn't shrink your world until the only person in it is the one breaking you. The more I healed, the more Adrian became volatile. Not outwardly. He never screamed or shoved. His cruelty came in the form of silence, manipulation, and weaponized kindness. He'd pull me close only to push me away. He'd say things like, I don't know why I bother, no matter how much I do, you're always broken. Then he'd kiss my tears and say, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I just want to see you happy. It was a cycle. Break me. Patch me up. Break me harder. And I kept thinking maybe I deserved it. Maybe I was too broken to be loved gently. The final crack came on a night I still can't forget. He convinced me to display my newest sketches at the student gallery. I was hesitant, scared, even. But he insisted, You're ready. You're brilliant. Let them see the fire in you. It felt like a turning point. Like maybe he still believed in me. The night of the gallery, I wore my favorite dress. The one my dad had given me for my 16th birthday. It still smelled faintly like home. I wanted to feel brave. Beautiful. But Adrian barely looked at me. He stood in the corner, talking to a group of his friends. Laughing, sipping wine, while I stood by my artwork, hands trembling. Then, I heard it. One of his friends, a girl I'd never seen before, laughed and said, She's cute in a tragic kind of way. Like a charity case. And Adrian didn't defend me. He laughed. Right along with them. Laughed at the broken girl he saved. Laughed at the art he told me was brilliant. Laughed like I was nothing more than a sick joke he'd been in on from the beginning. I left without a word. That night, I went home and stared at every sketch I'd ever drawn. The pain, the hope, the healing, I saw it all for what it really was. Evidence. Evidence that I gave my soul to a man who used it for sport. My entire journey, every fragile step forward, had been watched, calculated, and twisted. He hadn't healed me out of love. He'd healed me just enough to feel the cracks again when he shattered me all over. That was the night something inside me shifted. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was clarity. I finally saw Adrian for what he was. Not a savior. Not a lover. A collector of broken things. Someone who liked the power of knowing he could fix only to destroy. And I knew exactly what I had to do next. Not cry. Not beg. Not leave quietly. No. I'd spent too long letting others write my story in red ink. This time, I'd be holding the pen. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. That's what he expected me to do. That's what always gave him power. Seeing me unravel, seeing my pain validate his control. So I gave him the opposite. The next morning, I woke up, looked in the mirror, and whispered to myself, he thinks he knows every part of me. But he forgot that even broken glass can cut deeper when sharpened by fire. I spent the entire day planning. The first rule of revenge? Don't look like you're planning revenge. So when I saw him later that week, I smiled like nothing had happened. I told him I was just tired, that I'd overreacted, that the gallery night was a blur. He kissed my forehead and said, "See? That's my girl. Always bouncing back." I let him believe he still had me. That I was still the fragile, grateful, saved version of myself he'd so carefully shaped. What he didn't know was, I'd started recording everything. Every text, every subtle jab disguised as care, every conversation we had from that point forward was documented. I created a new cloud folder titled, For When the Curtain Falls. I began rebuilding my connections too. Quietly. Carefully. I messaged Aisha. Apologized. Told her the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. She didn't hesitate. She said, I knew something was off. You disappeared into his shadow. But I'm here. Just tell me what you need. What I needed was time. And trust. I also reached out to one of Adrian's exes, someone he used to describe as crazy. Her name was Julia. I'd stalked her profile once, back when I still believed his side of the story. But now, I wondered what really happened between them. She replied within an hour. We met for coffee. The first thing she said was, let me guess, he built you up, made you feel like the only one, then slowly pulled the rug out from under your feet until you were blaming yourself for bleeding. My stomach dropped. Her words could have been cut and pasted from my diary. Julia had gone through it all. The same love bombing, the same slow erosion of self-worth, the same emotional manipulation disguised as romance. Only difference was, she left before he could destroy her entirely. He thrives on women who are rebuilding, she said, stirring her coffee. He doesn't want partners, he wants projects. Broken ones. She paused, looked at me seriously, and added, but you've got that look. The one I didn't have back then. What look? I asked. She smiled. The one that says you're not just gonna walk away. You're gonna take him down with you. She was right. I didn't just want to escape Adrian. I wanted to strip him down the way he did to me. Slowly, strategically, painfully. So I started phase 2. Control the narrative. I knew Adrian liked to be the hero in every room. He thrived on praise, admiration, power. But most of all, he needed to be seen as the good guy. So I became his biggest fan, publicly. At parties, I'd praise him. On social media, I'd post cute couple photos with captions like, couldn't have made it through this year without him, and my rock. My healer. He ate it up. He never suspected a thing. Meanwhile, in private, I was building an archive. I compiled his patterns. Voice memos of our arguments where he gaslit me. Screenshots of him flirting with other women behind my back. One especially incriminating audio clip where he mocked one of my panic attacks to his friend on the phone. saying, "It's kind of funny." She gets all shaky and breathy like a damn movie scene. That one broke something inside me all over again. But I didn't cry. I saved it, filed it under final strike, and then I played the long game. I let him think I was still under his spell, still desperate for his approval. The more I played along, the more reckless he became. He started seeing other girls again, quietly at first, then bolder. He even slipped once and texted the wrong name to me at 1 a.m. When I asked about it, he laughed it off. "Oh, come on, babe. It was autocorrect. You know you're my world." And I smiled, because I finally understood how much power I held when he thought I had none. The revenge wasn't going to be one big explosion. It was going to be a slow, exquisite collapse. And I was going to be the last thing he saw before it all crumbled. Adrian's life was built on mirrors. Polished, perfect reflections carefully angled so that everyone only saw the image he wanted to project. Loving boyfriend. Supportive partner. Gentle soul who rescued a broken girl and nursed her back to life. And I had let him polish that image until it gleamed. Because I needed his confidence high, his arrogance blinding. People like Adrian never see the ground until it cracks beneath them. And on a rainy Thursday evening, I gave it the first crack. It started with a carefully worded email, anonymous, untraceable, from a concerned friend to the university's Fine Arts Committee. Subject: allegations against Adrian Cross, emotional abuse and manipulation of students. Attached were files, audio, screenshots, dated messages. All very real. Not doctored. Not fabricated. Just the truth he never thought would see daylight. He bragged about his connections so often, I made sure to blind copy every one of them. Professors, gallery directors, artist friends, anyone who had ever praised him in a room I wasn't allowed to enter. I didn't name myself. Not yet. But it didn't matter. Within 48 hours, his name was whispered in every hallway like a warning. Some people defended him. Others stepped back in silence, eyes wide with disbelief. And Adrian? He was confused, angry, off balance. At dinner, he sat across from me fuming, unaware that I was the earthquake beneath his feet. "Someone's trying to ruin me," he said, stabbing his fork into a plate of salmon. Jealous, bitter novice with no proof. I watched him spiral with a calm so cold, it could have frozen fire. "You think it was Julia?" I asked gently. He scoffed. "Wouldn't surprise me. You saw how obsessed she was. I mean, come on. I saved these girls, and this is how they repay me?" That word again. Save. He wore it like armor. I wanted to laugh, but I just nodded. Played the part. The doting, worried girlfriend who couldn't possibly be plotting his fall. Inside, though, I was already onto phase 3. Exposure. Aisha helped me plan the second strike. We created a private page online titled Beneath the Canvas, a collection of stories submitted by other women who had experienced what I had with Adrian. It didn't take long for the messages to pour in. Different names. Same patterns. "You're the first person who made me feel less crazy." I thought I was the only one. I still hear his voice when I cry. And then came a message from someone I didn't recognize. He did the same thing to my sister. Only she didn't survive it. My heart stopped. I'd always known he was dangerous in the quietest ways, but this was beyond cruelty. This was predation. Aisha helped me compile every story into a timeline. A pattern. A history of manipulation spanning years and states. We published it as a blog post, linked the evidence, redacted the names where necessary. And finally, I wrote my own story. I didn't hide behind a screen name. I signed it with my full name. Because I wasn't afraid anymore. The post went live at midnight. By sunrise, it had over 17,000 shares. That morning, Adrian showed up at my door. His eyes were wild. Not sad. Not ashamed. Angry. Furious that someone had dared to expose him. You think this makes you brave? He snapped. You think airing your dirty laundry online makes you a hero? I stepped aside, letting him walk in like always. He thought I was still weak enough to be manipulated by proximity. I wasn't. I let him pace rant, throw his hands in the air and shout about slander, revenge, betrayal. And then, when he finally stopped to catch his breath, I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and hit play. It was his voice, mocking me, laughing at my trauma, telling his friend how pathetic I looked when I cried. The color drained from his face. I turned to him slowly. This isn't dirty laundry, Adrian, I said, my voice flat. This is your legacy. He moved toward me, but I didn't flinch. I have everything backed up, I added. Even if you destroy this laptop, it's all over the internet now. Your kingdom of mirrors is cracking. And guess what? Everyone's watching now. He didn't speak. For the first time since I met him, he had nothing to say. And I realized then, his silence wasn't power anymore. It was fear. Real fear. The kind he used to pull out of me like a puppet on strings. Only now, the strings were in my hands. And I was just getting started. After that night, Adrian didn't show up for 3 days. 3 days of silence. No texts. No calls. No dramatic voice notes filled with fake apologies or twisted guilt trips. But I knew he wasn't gone. Men like Adrian never leave until they're sure there's nothing left to control. No, he was regrouping. Plotting. Maybe even figuring out how to spin the story again. I knew him well enough to know he'd rather set fire to the truth than admit he'd been caught in it. So I struck again before he could. The art community that once praised him now buzzed with discomfort. Gallery invitations began to dry up. His mentors, who once called him a rising star with a tragic muse, stopped answering his messages. And I wasn't done. I released the second wave of stories, more women, more voices, more pain, and more proof. Adrian tried to fight back. He posted a long, self-pitying Instagram caption filled with empty platitudes. People love to destroy what they don't understand. I've made mistakes, but I've only ever tried to help. Please respect my healing journey. Healing? I almost laughed. He was scrambling, grasping for sympathy the same way he used to grasp for control. But the comments didn't go his way. For once, the world wasn't bending to his version of the truth. And it was only getting worse for him. A week later, the university announced they were reviewing complaints against adjunct staff members, and while they didn't name him publicly, everyone knew. He messaged me late that night. You ruined everything. I gave you everything. You were nothing before me. I stared at the words for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. But instead of replying, I sent him one of his own quotes. A voice memo he left me last year when I was having a breakdown and he told me to stop using trauma like a crutch. I captioned it simply, from your mouth to your grave. He didn't reply after that. But others did. Dozens of women who had never spoken out before. They thanked me. They shared more stories. Some cried on video calls. Some sent typed notes with shaking hands. Each one had been a stepping stone in his climb. And now, each one was a stone in the grave I was burying his image in. Still, I wanted more. This wasn't just about exposing him. I wanted him to feel helpless. I wanted him to question every room he walked into, every whisper behind his back, every handshake that hesitated too long. So I created something he couldn't ignore. A short film, titled simply, Muse. Written, directed, and produced by me. Funded through a quiet GoFundMe that Aisha and Julia helped promote in art circles. Shot in shadows, edited with flashes of pain, truth, voiceovers of real testimonies, including mine. The final scene? A man who paints women in praise until they bleed for him. And when they do, he steps back and calls it art. It premiered at a local gallery that once rejected me. Now, they beg me to headline. The crowd stood and clapped for 3 whole minutes. And in the back corner, I saw him, Adrian, leaning against the wall, face pale, eyes hollow. No one approached him. He wasn't special anymore. Just a ghost in the very space he used to dominate. I walked right past him. Our eyes met for the first time in weeks. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I'd already taken everything he used to define himself. His praise, his charm, his power. And I hadn't raised my voice once. There's a specific silence that follows public disgrace. It's not the absence of sound, it's the absence of control. And for Adrian, silence had always been his weapon. He knew how to pause just long enough to make you second guess your worth. How to let the quiet fill a room until it turned into self-doubt. But now, that silence belonged to me. He stopped showing up at art events completely. His once packed social feed turned into a gallery of emptiness. No new work, no partnerships, no quotes about healing or creativity. Rumor had it, his upcoming exhibition was pulled. His contracts with 2 curators were quietly canceled. The university officially announced his dismissal 2 weeks later. It didn't make headlines. It just disappeared. Just like he always made me feel when I needed him most. And now, I made him feel it, like he was vanishing, unheard, unseen. But revenge doesn't always end with ruin. Sometimes, it ends with reinvention. And that was my final move. The festival that once rejected my portfolio because they thought I wasn't ready or coherent enough reached out again. They wanted me to speak, not just screen my film. They wanted my voice. So I stood on that stage in front of a packed room of artists, critics, survivors, friends, and strangers, and I told them the truth. Not about Adrian by name, but about what people like him do. How they twist kindness into leverage. How they choose partners not to build with, but to build upon. How they smell vulnerability like blood and pounce in the name of love. And I told them how I rebuilt myself. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Because the broken pieces weren't garbage. They were weapons. And I had learned how to hold them without bleeding. I ended the speech with a line that wasn't poetic, or rehearsed, or crowd-pleasing. It was just honest. I used to think I was weak for falling for someone like him. But now I know I was powerful enough to survive it. And dangerous enough to walk away carrying his mask. The room was silent. And then it wasn't. The applause felt like closure. But more than that, it felt like beginning. That night, I passed by Adrian's favorite bar on my way home. The one he used to hold meetings in. The one where he charmed girls with his quiet eyes and faux wisdom. He was sitting alone at the far corner. Unshaven. Head down. No one beside him. Just a man with no stage left, no applause waiting, no mirrors left unbroken. He looked up. Saw me. I smiled, not in pity. Not in triumph. Just a small, knowing smile. Because he knew. He finally knew. I wasn't the shattered girl he met on the gallery floor. I was the storm he invited in, thinking he could control it. And now? He lived in the ruins. You'd think that was the end. That a ruined reputation, a lost career, and a silent crowd would be enough. But some men, some monsters wear their delusion like armor. And Adrian? He was still convinced he was the victim of a smear campaign. Still clinging to the fantasy that I was the manipulator. That I had somehow orchestrated his downfall not from survival, but out of spite. I found out from a friend in the community. He was working on a comeback. A self-published memoir. The Muse Who Turned. I nearly choked when I heard the title. It was full of half-truths and poetic lies, painting me as a fragile girl with abandonment issues who had twisted his kindness into cruelty. A tragic love letter to a relationship he claimed he couldn't save. There were no names in the manuscript, but everyone would know. It was his final attempt to rewrite the story. To twist the knife back. But what he didn't realize was, I owned the blade now. I got a leaked copy from someone on his editing team. And I read every word, not in pain, but in planning. Because this time, I wouldn't just destroy his image. I'd dismantle his illusion. So, I waited. I waited until his online pre-launch event, the live-streamed reading where he planned to open up and answer curated questions from his audience. I watched him sit in front of that camera, still wearing his performer's mask. Still so smug, even in his tattered shell of a life. But I had the final word ready. Just before the Q&A began, I submitted a question. Not under my name. Under her name. The girl whose sister didn't survive him. The girl whose story he erased. My question popped up live on screen for thousands to see. Why did you leave out the girl who took her own life because of you? The comments section exploded. He froze. Stumbled. Tried to play it off. I don't know what that's referring to. But others followed. More questions. More truth. No escape. The stream crashed less than 5 minutes later. The site removed his promo within the hour. The pre-orders were canceled. And the company offering him a distribution deal dropped him quietly the next morning. He never spoke of the book again. Because it wasn't just a failed memoir. It was a confession he didn't realize he'd written. And now, the world had seen it for what it was. A desperate man trying to control the final chapter. But that chapter didn't belong to him. It belonged to us. To me. And I had already written the ending. In fire. People always ask what closure feels like. They expect it to be loud. Explosive. Fireworks and courtroom drama. But in reality, it's quiet. It's the silence that doesn't ache anymore. It's walking past the place where everything's shattered and feeling nothing. It's realizing the story no longer lives in your throat because it already lived through you and you survived. Adrian disappeared after the book fiasco. Not from the planet, no. Just from relevance. He moved to a smaller city, tried to start over with a new persona. Word got out though, like it always does. You can't bury the truth when it's been tattooed on your past. And even if no one said it out loud, they knew. You could see it in the way they hesitated to work with him. The way they nodded politely but didn't invite him in. The way women looked over their shoulders when he entered a room. He had become what he feared most. A forgotten man who once thought he was a god. As for me, I didn't rebuild into who I used to be. I became someone new. Not harder. Not colder. Just wiser. Sharper. Rooted. The art I create now comes from truth, not pain. I run workshops for survivors, some still shaking, some ready to scream. And I let them know, you don't have to bleed to be heard. And sometimes, just sometimes, I get messages from people who knew him, old colleagues, students, even friends. They say things like, you were right. We didn't see it before. Thank you for speaking. But one message stood out. It came from his mother. She didn't defend him. She didn't curse me either. She just wrote, I hope one day he feels even a fraction of what he made you feel. Not because I want him to suffer, but because I want him to finally understand. And that was the final cut. Not mine, his. Because I didn't just destroy Adrian. I exposed him. Took off the mask. Held up the mirror. Let the world see who he really was. And now, even he can't unsee it. He built his world on broken girls, thinking he could glue us into his design. But when I shattered, I didn't fall apart. I turned into glass. Sharp. Transparent. And impossible to hold without bleeding. So if you're listening, Adrian, and I know you are, this is your ending. The one you tried to write for me. Except now, the pen's in my hand. And I wrote your name. In ash.